Shocking revelation. Millionaire's son hits pregnant woman husband's incredible response will inspire you. Jake Thompson's heart raced, a turbulent storm brewing inside as he gripped his phone, struggling to comprehend the voice on the other end. His hands trembled, slick with sweat, and he fought the urge to crumple to the pavement. Sarah's doctor had been graphic. She'd been hit. A flash of a sports car. A careless night, his remarkably steady world shattered with each word. "We're in the emergency room. She's stable." But he felt lightheaded, visions of their future flickering like a faulty bulb, the warmth of their little home now cold. How could he endure this? The agonizing uncertainty clawed at his insides. His mind spiraled, consumed with dread. In a sleepy suburb, he had built a life predicated on hard work, perseverance, and love. How could it all be undone in a heartbeat by a privileged brat behind the wheel? He wasn't ready for this. Facing the unforgiving reality of Sarah's delicate condition cut deeper than a wrench slipping from his grip, he vaulted into the hospital's sterile corridors. Memories of the life they had crafted together engulfed him. The laughter, the planning, the baby's room still in boxes, it all threatened to collapse under the weight of desperation and fear. A wave of anger surged. Who was Derek Lawson to jeopardize everything they built? The well-to-do families living near them lived in a different world, one where consequences seemed laughable. Why should he be held accountable when they could wash their sins away with wealth? Days blurred, leaving him shattered in hospital chairs as Sarah slowly improved. The dawn of each new day felt like climbing a mountain, only to experience another loss of breath as bills piled up. The Lawsons released their empty public apology, a hollow echo of remorse that sparkled with disingenuous charm. Jake felt the suffocating pressure of their disparity squeeze tighter around him. He battled resentment like a shadow, one that loomed large and unrelenting, whispering doubts about their sanity in the face of so much injustice. Before he could spiral further, he was jolted by a voice, something deep within, a call to action. He remembered the stories his grandfather had told, tales of men who refused to back down in the face of tyranny or entitlement. "We stand for those who can't stand for themselves." His grandfather's words rang true. But could he? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Fueled by the fire of family legacy and rising tensions, Jake resolved to confront Derek Lawson. His heart thundered. What did a mechanic know of privilege's dubious arena? He gathered friends and local business owners, a collection of unheralded fighters standing with a common goal. Yet the shadows of doubt stalked him, taunting him with this path bring peace or ignite a wildfire of conflict. The plan unfolded, but so did a gnawing dread. Each step closer to the Lawsons unveiled hidden secrets, whispers of corruption promising to crush not just his ambitions but possibly his very being. Clenching the folder containing evidence against them, he felt the defining moment approach. A seismic shift in the understanding of power loomed before him. As he stood, ready to challenge everything he believed, Jake wrestled with that dreadful reality. Could justice even see him? Jake's knuckles whitened as he clutched the evidence folder closer to his chest, its edges digging into his palm. The Lawsons lived by their own rules, a set of expectations molded by wealth and influence. Had he underestimated their reach? Every confrontation replayed in his mind as he weighed the pros and cons of his impending actions. In the hushed chaos of the hospital, he recognized this was no ordinary dispute. It was a battleground for dignity and justice. Determined to hold Derek accountable, Jake sought the counsel of his closest friends first, those who shared the same indignation. They gathered in the garage after hours, where harmful thoughts could be muted by the humming engines of their daily work. The air was thick with tension and movement, punctuated by the occasional clink of tools. Conversations lobbed back and forth like a tennis match, torn between anger and hopeful resolve. I'm not saying we shouldn't take a stand, Mike, a local contractor, said, crossing his arms. But confronting them directly? They have an army of lawyers ready to pounce on any mistake we make. It's dangerous. But we also can't let this slide, Jake replied, his heart pounding in his ears. What they did cannot just be swept under the rug. Sarah deserves better. Our child deserves better. We have to amplify our voice. Loud silence enveloped Jake's words as a thin veil of understanding hummed in the air. It was apparent that many shared his frustration, but the fear of repercussions snaked through the room, coiling tighter around their resolve. The culmination of their brainstorming revealed a grim reality. Though each friend carried a quiet bravery, they were still overmatched by Derek's world of elite defenses. No matter what justice looked like, it was evident that facing off meant stepping onto uneven ground, where their lives could unravel with a single legal blow. That evening, unable to navigate the complexities of the scenario he deconjured, Jake drove aimlessly through the streets. Shadows from the neon lights reflected off the pavement, mirroring his inner turmoil. How many others had sat on the sideline when they had a chance to act? The notion of inaction gnawed at him deeper than the fear of the Lawsons' lofty backlash. It dawned on him that confronting injustice could redefine not just their reality but ignite change in others as well. Sure, the Lawsons could cloak themselves in the luxury of wealth, but Jake would harness the struggles of those who could not afford to stay quiet. With renewed clarity, he started mapping out the broader implications of his actions. If he truly aimed for change, he needed to consider more than just his immediate battle. Could this effort set off a ripple in their community, prompting others to rise up alongside them? He envisioned flyers plastered in break rooms, gathering support from workers who felt similarly wronged. Jake felt an electrifying thrill at this thought, a deviation from impotent rage to resolute purpose. The stakes elevated dramatically. If he could harness this moment, not just for himself but for everyone affected, they could rewrite the narrative of their small town. As he parked the car and stepped onto the pavement, a sense of urgency coursed through his veins. There would be strategic planning. There would be sacrifices. But more importantly, there would be alliances forged through shared pain and the pursuit of justice. But first, he had to gather the courage to face Derek Lawson once again. This was no longer just about Sarah, it was about confronting the entirety of the system, and Jake was ready to face the repercussions of his convictions. Yet, as the shadows deepened, a new fear iced over his bravado. What if he lost everything fighting the battle he had chosen? Would they emerge as martyrs or merely ashes in the winds of privilege? With those thoughts lingering, he walked toward what awaited him, a ground on which he would either uncover his true strength or be smashed under the weight of entitlement. Jake stood at the edge of his driveway, the morning sun casting long shadows around him. This was it, the day he'd confront Derek Lawson again. That early light felt deceptive. It surrounded him with warmth and hope while his insides churned with unease. The conversation had been laid out in his mind, rehearsed in the small hours of the night, but adrenaline surged through him as he replayed each word. Each potential response Derek might hurl back. He grabbed his car keys and made his way to the hospital once more. As he drove, doubts crept into his thoughts. Was he truly ready to expose Derek for who he was? And the fear of repercussions bubbled underneath, reminding him of everything he had to lose: his family, his job, his dignity. Yet, beneath the weight of that fear, his resolve hardened. This wasn't merely a fight for Sarah but a reckoning against entitlement itself. Parking the car felt like entering a boxing ring. He stepped into the cool air of the hospital parking lot, conscious of how the world continued to bustle around him, a world that remained oblivious to the turmoil he carried. A few medical staffers crossed paths with him, engaged in their morning routines. Their normalcy felt like a stark contrast against the fray of emotions in his chest. Jake encountered the reception desk, and his pulse quickened. He straightened his back and mentally prepared himself for the confrontation ahead. The familiar face of a nurse offered him a nod, assuring him he was in the right place. But as he approached the room where Derek was confined, he felt as if he were walking toward a coliseum. When he pushed the door open, Derek was there, propped up in bed, a smug smile twisting his lips. The robust presence of privilege surrounded him, as if the walls themselves were adorned with wealth. Jake hesitated, his heart racing with the instinctual desire to recoil, but he had come too far to back down now. "Jake," Derek greeted with affected casualness, his tone dripping with condescension. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the crap, Derek. We need to talk about what happened." Jake's voice projected more confidence than he felt. The challenge hung thick in the air. A glimmer of amusement passed through Derek's eyes, and he leaned back, arms folded. "What is there to talk about? I'm the one in the hospital bed, remember? You're the one losing sight of reality." Jake inhaled sharply but pressed on. "You think you can just walk away from this? The damage you caused isn't some minor inconvenience. Lives are at stake here, and it's time you faced real consequences." That moment of confrontation illuminated Jake's resolve in ways he hadn't anticipated. As Derek's expression soured, Jake realized he was not simply standing up for Sarah's dignity. He was taking stabs at the very fabric of Derek's world, one woven with threads of arrogance and impunity. "You're making a mistake," Derek bristled. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? This is just a little speed bump for people like me." With those words, a realization washed over Jake. This moment was no longer just about Derek. It was about dismantling the very narrative that allowed people like him to believe they were above accountability. Anger coiled within him, fueling an energy he hadn't felt before, as if light was being shed on a broader truth. "I won't let you make this about your privilege," Jake retorted, his voice steadier now. "People like you should face the consequences of their actions. I'm ready for whatever you throw at me." Suddenly, a sudden flash of uncertainty crossed Derek's face, the smirk fading into a fleeting vulnerability. For a split second, Jake saw the man not as the entitled perpetrator but as someone cornered by the truth he so desperately tried to evade. With newfound determination, Jake realized he wouldn't just be confronting Derek but the systemic failures that had allowed Derek's arrogance to flourish. He would unravel the layers of privilege, challenge the assumptions, and hold not just one man accountable but the entire oppressive structure that undergirded their existence. As he stepped back, leaving the tension simmering in the room, a thought struck him. What would the next confrontation reveal? What pieces of the puzzle lay hidden in Derek's world, waiting to be uncovered? Determined, Jake strode out of the hospital, a fire igniting within him. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. It was the start of something larger. The moment of truth approached, and he could feel the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on him, one that would test his very soul. Jake stood outside the hospital, taking a deep breath, the air filled with a mix of antiseptic and uncertainty. Each step away from Derek's room resonated with the gravity of what he had just faced. The confrontation had forced him to confront a part of himself he had kept buried: his anger, his need for justice, and a deep-seated questioning of his own worth. He didn't just want to protect Sarah. He wanted to dismantle the sense of helplessness that had plagued him for years as he navigated the sterile corridors. The chatter of nurses and the beeping of equipment faded into the background. His mind was racing. What were the true implications of his actions? He had challenged Derek, but what did that really mean for him in his own life? What did he expect to achieve? Answers eluded him as he climbed into his car. Starting the engine, Jake's hands trembled slightly against the steering wheel. Seeking clarity, he pulled out his phone and began scrolling, searching for stories similar to Sarah's, cases where entitled individuals faced justice. With each article he found, a sense of empowerment washed over him. He could gather evidence, compile testimonies, and perhaps even partner with someone who understood the intricacies of the legal system better than he did. He left the hospital premises. Jake hesitated. This fight was about Sarah, but also a crucial crossroads in his growth, a challenge that would draw out capabilities he had buried under years of complacence. Could he become an advocate for change? The thought sparked both excitement and dread. This wasn't just about taking down Derek. It was about discovering who he could be in the process. He parked at a coffee shop, a familiar haunt where he often met friends after work. Today, however, as he entered, the buzz of laughter felt alien. He had come to realize that he was shifting, evolving into someone with purpose. That meant the relationships he once found comfort in might no longer fit the man he was becoming. "Hey, Jake," a friend called from a booth in the back. But Jake felt distant from the conversation. A disconnect hung around him like a heavy cloak. "Hey," he replied, his mind focused elsewhere as the chatter rose around him. Jake couldn't shake the feeling of tension pulsing within. After a few minutes of forced small talk, he stood up abruptly, excusing himself. He stepped outside, the weight of the world pressing on him. He wanted to scream and question everything all at once. "Do I even fit here anymore?" he whispered to himself, staring at his reflection in the tinted glass of the cafe. A flicker of realization hit him. He needed allies who shared this emerging sense of purpose. But the search for connections now felt overwhelming. How many others had faced injustice and felt alone? What if he could find them? What if he could open up a dialogue, a conversation about the systemic failures he felt he was now awakening to? His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah she wanted to meet. A surge of urgency flooded through him. This was his chance to share his resolve, to include her in the mission he was starting to envision. Meeting her might not only strengthen their bond, it could reinforce the collective fight they both needed. With renewed determination, he replied and committed to meeting her in half an hour. Each moment felt electrified with possibility. He wasn't just stepping into a confrontation with Derek. He was stepping into a new life forged by purpose and action. But as he left the cafe, footsteps echoed behind him, halting him in his tracks. Jake turned. The shadows had taken on a different shape. Was he truly ready for the challenges that lay ahead? And who was penetrating his journey just as he began his quest for justice? A figure stood obscured in the distance, eyes studying him, and suddenly the stakes felt higher. Jake took a moment to absorb the unsettling presence looming behind him. The figure stood still, partially hidden in the dim light. Was this just a shadow of his growing paranoia? Or did someone truly intend to interrupt his newfound mission? His heart raced, matching the inner tumult he felt. This was supposed to be a fresh start, not an obstacle to derail him. "Can I help you?" Jake called out, attempting to mask the tremor in his voice. The figure stepped closer, revealing a familiar face. Marcus, Derek's childhood friend. The mere sight triggered a wave of latent anger within him. Could this confrontation be a prelude to more entanglements with Derek's world? Marcus's demeanor was disarming, an unsettling blend of casual friendliness and an undercurrent of intimidation. "Hey man, I just wanted to talk. Heard you've been stirring things up," he said, his tone almost amused. "You and I both know Derek doesn't take well to threats." Jake clenched his fists, the urge to push Marcus back into shadows swelling. This isn't about Derek. It's about what he did to Sarah. She doesn't deserve this. "Sure, but you don't want to make an enemy out of him, Jakey boy. Protecting her comes with risks," Marcus replied, casually leaning against the brick wall, as if they were merely discussing the weather. His casual dismissal only fueled Jake's fury. He wasn't here to be intimidated. "You think I care about that?" Jake shot back, feeling the fire ignite within. "No more hiding. No more playing nice. I'm ready to fight for what's right, and if that means taking on Derek, then so be it." Marcus rolled his eyes, looking more amused than threatened. "You think you can go against someone like Derek and not face consequences? His world is not as fragile as you imagine. You'll need allies, not just boastful bravado." His sardonic smile vanished momentarily, replaced by a seriousness that tugged at Jake's insides. "But you won't find any in this coffee shop." Jake felt the intensity of those words settle in. Marcus wasn't wrong. He needed a plan, a strategy that spanned beyond his immediate emotions. He couldn't engage in a reckless fight. He had to be calculated, guarantee that pursuing Sarah's justice didn't sink them both. "What did you have in mind?" Jake asked, suddenly intrigued despite himself. "Let us say I could offer you some insights on how things work over on Derek's side," Marcus suggested, an unexpected glint of possibility in his eyes. "You'll have to be careful, though. This isn't a game. It's a battlefield." Intrigued but cautious, Jake considered the potential benefit. Yet, shadows of suspicion loomed large. Could he trust Marcus? Would this be a genuine partnership or just the beginning of a deeper trap? The need for allies echoed in his mind, but the risks were palpable. "You're serious?" Jake asked, studying Marcus's expression. "What's in it for you?" "A front row seat to the fallout, my friend. And maybe some thrill, too." Marcus grinned again, but Jake caught a hint of something darker behind it. Just as he began weighing his options, Jake's phone buzzed again, this time from Sarah. The message was simple. "Where are you?" The urgency stirred within him again, as he felt the pressure of his dual obligations dive deeper into the darkness of Derek's world, or remain committed to his original quest alongside Sarah. The internal tug-of-war made his decision increasingly tense. Marcus pushed off from the wall, stepping closer. "Just think it over, all right? I can be the guide in this maze. You'd be wise to keep your enemies close and tag the right allies." Jake didn't respond. Instead, he glanced back down at his phone, the weight of his choice bearing down on him. He could keep Sarah safe, or he could face the intricate game of power that had been laid out before him, potentially dragging both of them into peril as he headed toward his meeting with Sarah. Uncertainty gnawed at him. The tension threatened to coalesce into a decision with irreversible ramifications. He'd have to navigate this fine line carefully. What if aligning with Marcus would provide the leverage he needed to confront Derek more effectively? But each step drew him closer to the meeting that could redefine everything. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched, shadows trailing him from a distance, leaving him breathless with mixed dread and resolve. Was he ready to dive into the depths of this perilous game? The crowd around the cafe buzzed with its usual energy, but Jake's mind was miles away. He walked faster, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on his chest, like a stone lodged too deep to remove without effort. Every rhythmic beat of his heart echoed the urgency echoing in his mind. Keep Sarah safe or enter the fray with Derek and his cohorts. As he approached their meeting spot, Jake's thoughts tumbled over each other. Images of Sarah's face flitted through his mind, reminding him why he had waded into these treacherous waters in the first place. He had promised to be her protector, her ally, not a soldier in a war that didn't concern him, at least not yet. But with Marcus whispering promises of insight and strategy, the battlefield of Derek's influence beckoned. When he finally spied Sarah waiting at a small table outside, her eyes were lit with a mix of concern and eager anticipation. She looked up, relief flooding her features as he approached. The sight of her grounded him momentarily, allowing him to push aside the doubts swirling just beneath the surface. "Jake," she said softly, rising to greet him. "I was worried. You didn't answer my texts." "Yeah, sorry. Just got sidetracked," he replied, forcing a smile even as tension coiled in his stomach. She studied his face, the warmth in her gaze flickering as she noticed his unease. "Is everything okay? You seem tense." He glanced around, half expecting Marcus's shadow to loom behind him. "I had an encounter." "With Marcus?" "Yes, Derek's friend?" Sarah interrupted, her expression sharpening with concern. "What did he want?" "He offered some sort of alliance. Information about Derek, about his world," Jake admitted. He frowned, threading a hand through his hair, feeling the edges of a moral dilemma closing in on him. "Jake, that's dangerous. You can't trust him. You don't know where his loyalty lies," she cautioned, her voice low and serious. "I know," he replied, swallowing hard. "But I can't ignore what's at stake here. If it means getting ahead of Derek, I can't just dismiss it." She leaned closer, her tone laced with urgency. "But what if that pulls us deeper into this mess? You already know how ruthless Derek can be. This is about more than us now." The weight of this choice rested heavily on Jake's shoulders. He wanted nothing more than to assure her that he had everything figured out, that he wouldn't let the darkness of Derek's influence seep into their lives. Yet here he was, contemplating an approach that could either fortify their stand or ruin everything they had fought for. "I need to think it through," he finally said, more to himself than to her. "I want to protect you, but I also want to fight back. We can't let fear rule us." Jake watched as Sarah's features hardened, determination flashing across her face. "Then let us do it together. No secrets, no second-guessing. But we don't engage with Marcus unless it's on our terms. Okay? Her insistence ignited a flicker of confidence inside him. They were in this together. Okay, he agreed, the horizon of possible choices stretching out before him. You're right. We need a plan. Just as relief began to wash over him, an unexpected twist slammed into his gut. The cafe door swung open, and out stepped Derek himself, flanked by two imposing figures. The air thickened with tension as Derek's eyes locked onto Jake's, a sly grin creeping across his face. Well, if it isn't the vigilante and his lady, he snapped, the mockery in his tone sending a shudder through Jake. Fancy a chat? Caught between a desire to defend their space and the immediate necessity to maintain composure, Jake felt the weight of the impending confrontation swell. It was time to confront the threat head-on. Let us hear what he has to say, Jake murmured to Sarah, egging on a courage that he hoped would last as tensions reached a boiling point. Jake steeled himself for an encounter that promised to change everything. Could this meeting either reshape his fight against Derek or unravel all they had built together? The uncertainty loomed ahead like a storm cloud, unrelenting in its pursuit. And as Derek's insidious grin widened, Jake found himself questioning just how far he was willing to go to protect Sarah and to forge a path of his own that might just draw the battle lines more clearly than he could ever anticipate. Derek stepped closer, an insidious glint in his eyes that threatened to unravel Jake's resolve. I hear you've been mixing with the wrong crowd, Jake. You should know better than to meddle in affairs you don't understand. Jake squared his shoulders, the urge to defend himself clashing with the instinct to protect Sarah. The shifting dynamic felt like a chess game, the pieces shifting as Derek's presence drew heavier around them. This was no longer just a conversation. It was a challenge, one that Jake felt ill-prepared to face. Why don't you tell me what you think I don't understand? Jake replied, voice steady despite the internal turmoil. He didn't want to show weakness, especially not in front of Sarah. Derek chuckled, the sound so grating that it sent shivers down Jake's spine. You think you're playing the hero, but it's a dangerous game. You're out of your league, my friend. Loose lips can sink ships or worse. Jake caught a glance at Sarah. Her expression, a mixture of fear and steely resolve, bolstered his will. Derek was skilled at manipulating emotions, but Jake refused to become a pawn in his scheme. He took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. What do you want, Derek? Jake asked, his tone demanding yet cautious. If you're here to threaten us, you're barking up the wrong tree. Ooh, I like this fire in you, Derek feigned, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. But trust me, you need to tread carefully. I can offer a choice. Align with me and I might just let you and your little girlfriend sit this out. Or continue this foolish bravado and watch everything you care about come crashing down. Jake felt his heart hammering in his chest. The stakes were no longer abstract. They loomed large, threatening to engulf everything he cared about. A part of him wanted to laugh in the face of danger, defy Derek's threats, but another part whispered caution. Your threats don't scare me, Jake asserted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. We're not going to be intimidated. Brave words for someone standing on unstable ground. Derek's eyes danced with twisted glee. You're far too quick to dismiss the consequences of your choices. The irony wasn't lost on Jake. He was the one faced with the choice. His path diverged visibly before him. Risk further entanglement with Derek or explore the information Marcus dangled like a carrot. It was maddeningly confusing. Maybe there's a way we can help each other, Derek, Sarah interjected, surprising Jake. He turned to her, noticing the strength anchored in her presence. But only if you drop the theatrics and talk straight. What do you want? Jake admired her courage. He had lived in shadows of his insecurities for too long, but here, beside her, he felt the stirrings of something more formidable, determination laced with the fire of self-awareness. Derek's smirk faltered slightly as he considered her words, his mask of arrogance wavering. Now, that's an interesting proposition. I like a mind that isn't afraid to barter. But remember, everything has a cost. Speak clearly, then, Jake urged, stepping forward. What's your price? Derek leaned back, a calculating gleam lighting his eyes. The shift in power dynamics sparked hope, But Jake couldn't shake the primal instinct that this encounter could still spiral into chaos at any moment. The seconds stretched, each one laden with the weight of potential outcome, but Jake knew one thing for certain. They were standing at the edge of something monumental. Whether they would sink or soar was intricately tied to the choices made in the moments that followed. As the tension escalated, Jake realized that personal growth often emerges from confrontation. Here he was forced to confront his own fears, frustrations, and ambitions. "Let us see how willing you are to play my game first," Derek finally said, echoing Jake's thoughts with a sinister twist. "Are you ready to claim your place in the world? Or will you let it slip away?" Jake squared his stance, ready for whatever was coming next. He was prepared to respond, to rise to the challenge unfolding in front of him. This was the moment the tide could turn. They could either find leverage or face the fallout of Derek's plans unleashed. As he braced for the next unfolding move, the realization dawned on him. His journey into the fray wasn't merely for Sarah's protection but also a nascent awakening within himself. Because the time had come to face not just Derek but the person he was becoming, one that would no longer cower in the shadows. But as Derek's challenge hung heavy in the air, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that darker winds were about to blow. Jake's pulse raced as he faced Derek's looming challenge, a spectral weight of uncertainty hanging over them. For the first time, he felt an undercurrent of control surging within, replacing the suffocating pressure of fear. He could no longer view each interaction with Derek as a moment of intimidation. Instead, it became a crucible, one in which he could either forge his resolve or shatter. "Let us cut to it, Derek," Jake said, forcing steadiness into his tone. "You want something specific. What is it?" Derek's eyes narrowed, the glint of mischief now rivaled by a sharper, predatory gaze. "You're sharper than I imagined. You're gonna have to show that courage of yours if you want to play." Jake felt a flicker of apprehension at those words. Yet he pressed on, galvanized by a realization that he had something to protect. This was no longer about merely standing up to a bully. It was now about controlling the narrative of not just his life, but also Sarah's. Derek leaned in, pulling Jake back into the sphere of intimidation. "Your little game with Marcus? It could embolden you or it could expose you. Your choice to engage with me could either seal your fate or elevate you in ways you can't fathom." There was a twisted allure in Derek's offer. A part of Jake hungered for clarity, the prospect of stepping out from the shadows. But that hunger was tempered by caution. He had already witnessed how easily Derek could manipulate the threads of anyone's fate. "And what makes you think I want to be part of your world?" Jake asked, the question veiled with a simmering defiance. "Because you're already in it," Derek shot back, crossing his arms. "Every choice you've made this past month has led you here, to this pivotal moment." A chill coursed through Jake's spine, not due to fear, but recognition. He had strived for a conventional life, staying within the boundaries that drew lines around safety. Now, in stark contrast, was an opportunity to redefine who he could become. What if, Jake began slowly, recalling the illicit secrets he'd hastily gathered from Marcus, "I play you instead. What if I unearth what you're hiding beneath that smug facade?" Derek's smile faltered, and for the briefest moment, vulnerability flashed across his features. Jake caught that flicker, a revelation dancing on the edges of possibility. If he could push Derek, if he could outmaneuver him, then maybe he could reclaim not just his agency but also empower Sarah with it. "Interesting," Derek said, reevaluating. "Just be careful where you tread. A misstep could lead to devastating consequences." "Those consequences sound like the risks you've been playing with all along," Jake replied, finding his stride, the inference fueling his confidence. "Maybe it's time someone else calls the shots." Noticing Sarah's eyes, he understood that the weight of their decisions wasn't borne alone. They were intertwined in this journey, growing together, no longer diminished by fear of shadows but illuminated by collaboration. With newfound clarity, Jake could feel the anxious energy in Derek's shift. He was no longer facing a threat. He was in the midst of taking steps towards his own transformation, a shift from passivity to active engagement that, as Derek recalibrated in response to Jake's boldness, an unsettling thought germinated in Jake's mind. What would it mean for him to fully embrace this newfound posture? What skills and strengths lay dormant, waiting to be summoned? This realization was intoxicating yet terrifying. He had glimpsed a version of himself that refused to cower, a version willing to intelligently confront the chaos before him. But before the thrill could sink in fully, Derek's eyes gleamed once more, shifting into dangerously calculated territory. "Are you sure you want to play this game? This one I've been mastering for years." The impending confrontation loomed larger than ever, the promise of peril mingling with the adrenaline of opportunity. Jake knew they were teetering on the brink of a precipice, where one decision could change everything. And as he contemplated the battlefield ahead, he heard Derek's playful, taunting voice echo in his mind. "Your rise could just be the precursor to your fall." The stakes had escalated, a fierce reminder that while he may have found the courage to confront Derek, he had yet to embrace the full extent of his potential. What hidden depths within him were waiting to be unlocked? With urgency emanating through each heartbeat, he knew it was time to discover the answer both for himself and for Sarah. But just as he steadied his resolve, a shadow flickered at the edge of his awareness. Someone was watching them. The tension heightened as Jake felt his instincts flare, sensing that the convergence of their choices had drawn unexpected attention. What danger lay hidden in the revelations yet to come? Jake took a steadying breath, his gaze flickering around the dimly lit room filled with murmurs and interlaced tensions. The sensation of being watched stirred a primal instinct within him, urging vigilance. His heart drummed against his ribs as adrenaline coursed through his veins, sharpening his focus. He stole a glance at Sarah, whose expression was a blend of apprehension and curiosity. She was leaning slightly towards him, not just for support but as a subtle anchor. It was a reminder that they were in this together, each decision now threaded through both their fates. "What do you expect from this standoff?" he whispered to her, hoping to draw strength from her response. Sarah's eyes sparkled with a mixture of courage and fear. "I expect you to act, not react. You've come this far. Just be yourself." Her words resonated, shaping the resolve that surged within him. Jake recentered himself, focusing on the underlying purpose of this confrontation, not merely to best Derek, but to unveil truths hidden beneath deception. He would forge ahead not only for himself but also to shield Sarah from the chaos that loomed. Derek's voice jolted him back. "Someone's obviously on your mind, Jake. Care to enlighten the group?" The taunt laced with venom pierced through Jake's moment of clarity. Yet he embraced it, redirecting the anger towards determination. "Not someone, Derek. It's about everyone you've manipulated, the lives you've played with," Jake declared, noticing the flicker of surprise cross Derek's face. "That ends today. I'm taking control of my narrative." Derek scoffed, his facade cracking momentarily as he secured his composure. "You think you can expose me? That's cute." Jake leaned in, glancing sideways at the masked onlookers who had gathered. It hit him that this was not just a showdown. It was a very public unveiling of courage. If he faltered now, it wouldn't just embarrass him, it would reinforce Derek's hold over them both. "What if I told you I've uncovered more than you think?" Jake pressed on, invigorated. As the crowds shifted slightly closer, interest peaked. "What if I revealed your connections with Marcus? The stakes you've played?" The change in Derek was palpable. The mirth slipped away, replaced by a simmering rage that barely controlled his composure. The hold of fear began to shift, weighed down by exposure. For a fleeting moment, Jake saw the power shift, and with it came a surge of empowerment that coursed through him. Every person in the room became aware of the tension, whispers igniting curiosity as he took control of the narrative. In his mind, he was outlining strategies, possibilities. The realization brightened like a flame within him. The pieces of his strengths lay dormant no longer, waiting for this pivotal moment. Driven by a wave of daring, Jake took a step forward, pulling Sarah into the fold of this confrontation. "Together, we can shine light on anything you try to hide. Your reign of deception is ending," he asserted, feeling an electric charge race through him. The ripple effect transformed the room. Friends, rivals, and observers leaned toward them. They were not just silent witnesses. They were potential allies in a battle that threatened to redefine every hierarchy Derek clung to. But as the air thickened with anticipation, Jake felt another flicker, a disturbance in the ether. Someone else had been monitoring this moment, his pulse quickening as he sensed another shadow rising in their circle. Someone who could disrupt everything he had begun to regain. Derek's grin returned, full of malice. You want to play a game of retrieval, Jake? Then let us see who's been watching from the sidelines. That statement weighed like a stone in Jake's gut, the implications swirling into a fog of uncertainty. How deep did this web of deceit run? And who awaited in the shadows, ready to pounce on this newly exposed vulnerability? Are you ready for the true depths of what's been orchestrated? Derek's voice echoed, a finale lurking just at the edge of comprehension. As dread coiled like smoke, Jake understood this. Confrontation was merely the opening act. The real game was far more complicated, and he grappled with the knowledge that with every revelation he chased, darker secrets hung in the balance just waiting to be unearthed. The grip of suspense narrowed around him as he faced an unseen threat, a new specter in the fray, who may just alter the course of everything he sought to reclaim. What lay beyond Derek's smirk? Jake stood determined, feeling the weight of the decision he faced pressing down on him. Confronting Derek was no longer a matter of mere justice for Sarah. It had become about reclaiming his dignity and changing the narrative that the privileged elite had spun around them. The challenge set before him was uncharted, but for the first time, he felt that spark of leadership igniting within a recognition that he could confront this opposing force head-on. Derek's smirk might have faded for a brief moment, but Jake sensed it was more than just a fleeting reaction. It was a precursor, a sign that the power dynamics were shifting in his favor. He could not afford the fear that had once immobilized him. The self-doubt that followed him like a shadow needed to be sloughed off like old skin. Taking a step closer, Jake steadied his voice. I'm here not just to confront you but to call you out. Your importance in this community rests on privilege, and that privilege has cost so many their dignity, their peace, their lives. The words emboldened his resolve. There was no turning back now. He felt Sarah by his side, their bond stronger than the struggle surrounding them. She nodded encouragingly, and the strength of her support surged through him, feeding his determination. He realized their shared purpose ran deep. They were not merely reacting, they were creating a powerful stance against injustice. A circle formed around them, a mix of onlookers, local community members, and a few of Jake's friends who had sensed the change in the air. It transformed the tension from a confrontation between two men into a stand against corruption that lightened the burden on Jake's shoulders. This was not just his fight anymore. It was shaping into a collective manifestation of disillusionment against Derek's elite armor. Your threats are nothing but a sign of your weakness, Derek, Jake declared. His voice loud enough that even the casual glances from the surrounding crowd shifted into something tangible. Every story I hear, every life affected by the darkness you cast, reveals your shortcomings more than your supposed strengths. He sensed the room pulse with energy, a collective awareness awakening within them, emboldening him further that it was now or never. This moment served as a pivot point. Jake's voice swelled with passion as he addressed the crowd. We can no longer allow this culture of entitlement to thrive unchecked. It's time for us to take agency over our lives, to bind together and dismantle the narrative that fear has sown. The gymnasium of voices rippled around him, the invisible fabric drawing them closer to solidarity. Suddenly, a hand shot up from within the crowd. Mike, his friend and fellow mechanic. We've been giving in for too long. It's time we stand for what's right. Let us reclaim our neighborhood. The collective pulse quickened. Shouts of agreement erupted, turning caution into camaraderie as their frustrations turned into rallying cries for accountability. Derek's facade of calm cracked, the tangible anger fueling his presence. You think a small-town uprising can threaten me? You're pathetically misguided. His threats ricocheted, laced with arrogance. But Jake, no longer intimidated, stood taller, his narrative no longer secondary to Derek's evils. Not a small-town uprising, Derek, he retorted fiercely. This is a movement for every person you've exploited and belittled. You think your wealth protects you? We're done being silenced. Sarah's eyes sparkled with fierce pride, igniting Jake's resolve further. He was not just stumbling through shadows. He was clawing his way into the light, and nothing would dim that now. Gone was the passive man trapped by circumstance. A warrior was rising from within, clad not in armor but in the resilience of community and truth. Realizing his control over the room was slipping, Derek leaned heavily against the wall, masked irritation spilling over. "You're naive if you believe your words hold any weight. I will crush any uprising with a mere flick of my wrist." But Jake felt the shift. The cracks in Derek's bravado began to flash. For every reaction Derek threw, there was a growing resistance festering in those around them. "I say we take a stand united," Jake declared, summoning every breath he had to speak through nervousness. But his presence was not his alone. "Together we can demand accountability. Together we can make them hear us." Encouraging murmurs trickled through the audience, building to a crescendo of unified voices echoing the weight of his declaration. The flicker of uncertainty passed over Derek's face, vulnerability pricking through his arrogance. Yet, Jake was buoyed by that hint of fear, transforming the fray into an opportunity with newfound confidence. Jake extended an invitation to those gathered. "Let us meet tomorrow, not just to discuss what we've faced but to plot our course. We deserve a voice." A wave of resilience washed over the crowd, enthusiasm lifting the tension in the air. This was more than mere defiance. It was the beginning of a journey marked by shared struggles and a yearning for justice. As Derek retreated, his final glare spoke volumes. But Jake felt the adrenaline dissolve into an uplifting sense of accomplishment. He was no longer a solitary figure in a fight against privilege. He was now a leader surrounded by comrades ready to reclaim their truth. The collective strength surged through Jake, lifting the weight of apprehensions that had burdened him for too long. Every interaction had sharpened his growth. He was climbing a staircase leading to newfound resolve. He could feel the echo of his grandfather's words reverberate within him. "We stand for those who can't stand for themselves." With Sarah beside him, they were fortified by purpose, transformed from mere victims into architects of change. The confrontation with Derek awakened not just a fire against injustice but uncovered Jake's own strength, a growing tenacity that pushed him beyond fear and into the exhilarating realm of possibility. Jake vowed this journey was only just beginning. He now understood that true empowerment stemmed from standing tall, not against others, but alongside those who sought justice. With each step forward, he realized that his courage didn't just arise from conflict, it was fueled by the unity and resilience of a community unwilling to be driven to silence any longer. This pursuit of justice was a mosaic Jake was now proud to be a part of, piece by piece revealing the strength that lay hidden in their unbreakable bonds. Together, they could dismantle the very foundations of corruption. As he walked away, strength forged in unity cascaded through him. The stakes had never felt higher, yet Jake was exhilarated, knowing they had finally set the wheels of transformation in motion. This was not just a fight for their future. It was a powerful leap toward reclaiming their lives from the cold hands of entitlement. The final act against oppression was waiting just around the corner, but Jake was resolute. In the tapestry of their lives, they were set to weave a path laced with resilience and hope. And as they stepped into the horizon, the clarity was undeniable. The journey had positioned him exactly where he needed to be. Now was the time to rise. You need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. A simple act with powerful repercussions. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Join us, your voice matters.